get up here and just start the program, and Laura said, no, you have to be introduced. So thank you, Laura, for a wonderful introduction. So thanks for coming out in the rain. I gave a walk, and some of you may have been on one on Saturday. Kind of hot, not like today. At least it didn't rain, it didn't thunderstorm. Thank you for coming. Where we followed the route of the 18th Georgia. 18th Georgia, you may know as the 3rd Texas. They were these Georgia boys were I should say the Texans were so enamored by these Georgia boys that they gave them the new name, the 3rd Texas. So what I'm going to be doing this evening is sort of like a expansion of what I did over on Saturday. And what I'd like to do, and this is going to be a little bit of a different presentation, although I'll do a little bit more narrating than I did on Saturday. I'm going to let the soldiers talk to you. And, I discussed this with Linda. I said, should I just read the quotes, or should I put them up there? And it's half a dozen of one or 6 of the others, so they're up there. Anyway, and I know you can read, but I'll read it with you. All right, without further ado, we know that the Texas unit was commanded by, well, I should say, the Texans were commanded by John Bell Hood, and he was kicked upstairs, excuse me, by the way, if you're wondering, I was wearing Nutter's ice cream. A little bit in my mouth, but most of it.
You didn't bring us in.
Got on my shirt. John Bell Hood, very distinguished leader, very aggressive Kentuckian. He's going to command the division. The division only is composed of 2 brigades. At Gettysburg, he's got double the number of men and double the number of brigades. And remember, and sometimes we forget about this, what happened right before this campaign, the Maryland campaign, the Second Bull Run campaign, Second Manassas campaign? Was there much time for the Army to be resupplied with all kinds of things, including men? No. So these units are going to be very, very small. And this division, Hood's division, will only be about maybe 2,200 men. Not only that, but as you know, and as we'll be talking about, these men are primarily eating what during this time? Green corn and sometimes green apples. And what does that do to your digestive tract? You're behind a tree, a lot of guys, right? William Wolford is only a colonel here. He will be promoted to brigadier general. He will be badly wounded both at the Wilderness and Spotsylvania. Will finish off the war, not in command of troops, but in command of a district in northern Georgia. But he commands the so-called Texas Brigade, although it's not really just Texas Brigade, as we'll see. And the guy over on the right is Evander Law, who commands a brigade here as well. And he will continue to command the brigade until he runs afoul of Longstreet, and is going to have some problems as a result of it. But that's a different presentation. The units, this is at a time before they've started to recombine the Army to try to put state units together as much as possible. So you can see, in terms of law, he's got units composed of 4 different states. For the Texas unit, although we still call them the Texas Brigade, even though they're South Carolina boys and Georgia boys. And even at Gettysburg, they will not be all Texans. Who's going to be with them? By the way, I just like to ask questions, so I break it up a little bit. Who's with them?
3rd Arkansas.
The 3rd Arkansas, right. And the 18th Georgia is going to follow William Wolford, and it's going to be part of his old Georgia Brigade. Okay, fine. All right, getting my glasses, please. Here we go. So they will get to the Sharpsburg area on probably late morning of the 15th. And what were they doing the evening before? Where were they? They were at Fox's Gap. They came in just toward the end of the battle there, and Lee is going to provide orders to evacuate, to begin the retreat, first to Keedysville, and then he's going to move the army to Sharpsburg, and they're going to form the rear guard. And as one of the soldiers, I believe this is Lemon, as I'll show you a picture of him. They will arrive, as he says it, on the heights across the Antietam River near the town. So they haven't gotten yet to the West Woods. They're going to be close to the Boonesboro Pike, and then they're going to be ordered to the extreme left, as you can see. Now, I don't know. Hopefully this is working, this further thing. But, you know, this doesn't work on it. So I got to use this magic finger. But you can see they're up around Dover Church, right there. The evening, I think it's going to stay here. All right, so on the evening of the 16th, you're going to have Truman Seymour's brigade, as you may know, is going to be detached from the rest of Meade's division. Remember, the First Corps is coming over Antietam Creek during the afternoon of the day before the battle on the 16th. And Truman Seymour's brigade will be detached. You can see Anderson. Oh, thank you. That's right. The magic finger. I forgot about that. I appreciate that. Thank you. And someone was talking about what the name of this brigade is. I would always call it Magilton. I can't remember who told me it was. Oh, it was at their Magilton, right? Like a Jilton. They're heading over to the area of the North Woods where the First Corps is deploying for action on the following morning. But you've got Truman Seymour's brigade, and specifically in the front, the Bucktails, the 13th Pennsylvania Reserves. And that evening, they're going to be fighting. But what's interesting is they're mainly against Law's brigade. Wilford's Texans and the 18th Georgia are actually going to be in this area. You're going to see that some of them will get into the woods, as we'll see. But I don't want to say tragic. I guess it is. Any time a soldier is going to be killed or wounded, it is a tragedy. The Bucktails are very, very upset because their beloved commander, Hugh McNeil, is going to be mortally wounded, but so will be the commander of the 13th Mississippi. They sort of exchange leaders in that regard. Both are going to be mortally wounded. This is the guy. This is James Lennon. And if you've not read his book, Feed Them the Cold Steel, he writes a book that is probably as descriptive as any account I've read. And we're gonna hear a lot of them. But here he is. Can we read it together? Okay, we were literally famished, having marched hard, fought battles, and marched again on nothing but green corn in the last 3 days. Sometimes they'll talk about how they haven't eaten anything in 3 days. Yeah, they've eaten. If you want to eat that green corn, there it is. We formed in the rear, and this is in the West Woods now. So what happens is, I guess I jumped a little bit. What's going to happen is, at nightfall, the Texas Division, or excuse me, the Hoods Division, is going to retreat into the Dover Woods, the West Woods, and they are going to be waiting for the rations to be coming. We formed in the rear, he says, and waited, but the promised wagons and rations had not arrived. We lay on our arms suffering. Can you imagine? 3 days with nothing but green corn. So you're suffering from hunger, you're also suffering from the effects of the corn. And, I love this part, the wagons did not reach us until just before dawn. Now, they thought it was going to cut, those wagons were going to come in much, much earlier. And were almost assaulted by the men, wild as they were in their hunger, you can imagine. And he doesn't really go into this very much. But what was in those wagons? Flour. You know, they're hoping biscuits and they're hoping pork and eggs and chicken and everything else. Flour. Any yeast? No yeast. So they're going to take their water, which is probably contaminated, and they're going to fashion loaves. They're going to put it on their bayonets. They're going to put it on stones. They're going to throw it in the fire, and they're cooking. You're not happy, but at least it's not green corn. And what happens is, I guess I don't have that. A courier will come galloping into the West Woods with an order to begin to leave the West Woods, get in line, get your rifles, move out along the Smoketown Road, which is over here, because the Yankees are coming. They have not eaten anything yet, so they are not very happy. And they're feeling, well, let's put it this way, they're fighting mad. Let's put it that way. Okay. This is Rufus Dawes, second in command of the 6th Wisconsin. Here they are right here. You got the 6th Wisconsin, the 2nd Wisconsin. Can you see, by the way, am I in your way? Okay. Just tell me to move, okay? The rest of the Iron Brigade is over here on this side of the road. And what happens is he will leave a wonderful memoir of what happened. Now, in front of him is Lawton's old division, Alexander Lawton's old brigade, I should say. It's now under Marcellus Douglas. They are in what we call the clover field. They were lying down initially, and he will relate what happens. And when I give a tour, I always like to read this, and I have people look at the fence line, and they look at the corn. I say, you got to visualize all of these men from the 6th and the 6th Wisconsin, the 2nd Wisconsin, heading through the corn to that fence. As we appeared at the edge of the corn, a long line of men in butternut rose up from the ground. That's Douglas's men. Simultaneously, the hostile lines opened up tremendous fire upon each other. Men, I cannot say fell, they were knocked out of the ranks by the dozens. Very graphic. But we jumped over that fence right there, and we pushed on, loading, firing, and shouting as we advanced. Well, Douglas's men have been defeated. They're heading for the Dunker Church and beyond, and this is what's going to happen. You can see right here, coming out of the West Woods, is Hood's division. And this continues the narrative, minus a, I know you're going to tell me about that, right, Linda? About the grammatical, the end of the quotation mark. A long and steady line of rebel brigade comes sweeping through the woods from around the church. So they're coming out from the church, and they raise a yell and fire. It's like a scythe running through a line. This is what Douglas is saying. Not Douglas, but Rufus Dawes. Now save who can. It's a race for life as each man runs back for the cornfield. So I want you to imagine you're a member of the 6th Wisconsin, and you've driven away this long line of Confederates that were in front of you. You drive them back toward the church, and you're heading toward the church, which is your objective. And in front of you marches a long line of men who will march up this way. They will turn to their left. They will lower their rifles and fire. Lenin will say, we crossed the pike, which is the that is the Hagerstown Pike, into a field of clover, that clover field, where we formed into lines of battle and loaded our rifles. So this is a little bit before they opened fire. The Yanks, about this time, emerging in force from a large piece of corn in our front. Talking about these guys right there. Coming toward us were hundreds of our own troops. So imagine the dilemma of these Texans, these Mississippi boys, etc., Georgians, when they want to open fire on the enemy that's coming toward them, but you've got literally hundreds of Georgians from Douglas's brigade in your front in a lot of disorder coming toward you. You've got to wait until they get around you before you can open fire. The fugitives, again, this is Lemon. The fugitives had just passed through or around our advancing lines, and now we saw the black hatted Yanks. What do we call those things? Hardy hats. Why are they wearing hardy hats? You think they're comfortable? I don't think they're very comfortable.
Unit pride.
Do you know any other unit that wears those hats? No. That's what they wore before the war. And as someone said, esprit de corps. What else? What would be another reason?
Intimidation.
Yes, intimidation. And you're going to see that at Gettysburg. If you've been up against this unit, which is the toughest unit in the Union Army, and you see them, and you've encountered them in the past, and they are tough to move. In fact, they're going to overwhelm you. How are you going to feel the next time you see those black-hatted guys come toward you?
Tain't no militia.
That's right. Let's get the heck out of here. Yes. This is Colonel Solon Ruff. He will not survive the war. He'll be killed around Knoxville in 1863. But according to Lemon, he writes, "Looky there, boys, at them black hats. Let's go knock them off." He was not intimidated by the Iron Brigade. Okay. Going back to Lemon. There's 70 or so they're advancing into the clover field. They have driven, and it's not just the part of the Iron Brigade. It's the 2nd U.S. It's the 86th, I believe, New York. Part of Phelps's brigade are being driven back.
14th Brooklyn.
Well, what's their other name?
84.
84th? 84th New York? Okay. About 70 or so Yankee bodies lay on the ground right in this area. I clearly remember the ground being littered with dozens of black hats. And then also remembered Ruff's words with grim amusement. Interesting. Knocked them off. Now Hood will leave a report, and I guess I could have put this at the end, but it was here in the cornfield that I witnessed the most terrible clash of arms, because his division is now going into the cornfield after the Yankees. By far that was occurred during the war. The two little giant brigades, his brigades of this division, wrestled with this mighty force, losing hundreds of their gallant officers and men, but driving the enemy from his position and forcing him to abandon his guns on our left. On our left, which would they be? Who's on the left?
4th U.S. Battery B.
Battery B. Now, they're not going to be abandoned for very long, but you know, these generals like to exaggerate a little bit. They want it to look good. Okay, so they're going into the cornfield. This is from a newspaper article that one of the members of the 18th Georgia is going to write to home. He's going to write a letter home. It's going to be published in the newspaper. He doesn't leave his name. "We drove the Yankees back most gallantly for a considerable distance, leaving the ground darkened with carcasses. The enemy fell back through a cornfield with the Texans following." And as Dawes will tell you, 2 out of every 3 of his men were down as a result. I mean, it's just horrible. And Dawes will continue his narrative back to the corn, into the corn, through the corn. The headlong fight continues, or flight continues. Now, Ruff, the commander of the 18th. Now, Hampton's Legion is on the left. You have the 18th Georgia. You have the 1st Texas. You have the 4th Texas is going to be in reserve, probably somewhere around where the Massachusetts Monument is, maybe a little bit south of that. You're going to have Law coming in on the right side of the cornfield, and we'll talk about these other units in just a little bit. But Ruff is going to say, advancing on the left of the Legion, which had its left on the turnpike, actually it should be the right of the Legion, which had its left on the turnpike. We drove the enemy in fine style out of the corn and back upon its supports. And now Dawes is retreating with his 6th Wisconsin, and he'll look to his right. Well, actually, I guess if he's retreating, he's looking to his left, but he's looking across Hagerstown Pike. Across the turnpike, 2 guns of Battery B, 4th U.S. Artillery, were in action. The pursuing rebels were upon them. Anybody know who commanded that unit, that section?
Stewart.
Stewart, Lieutenant Stewart, yeah. The ranks of the retreating line of the enemy unmasked a battery, which poured grape into our ranks with terrible effect. But it was soon silenced by a rifleman and the gunners ran away. And if you look at the report, Stewart's report, they lost a lot of men, Battery B, a lot of horses, etc. Now, we perceived several regiments of the enemy about 200 yards distant on the far side of the pike. That the first line would be the rest of the Iron Brigade, and behind them would be some units of Patrick's Brigade on the far side of the pike, moving by the flank towards our left. Also, he saw the battery of guns. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention was their tactics. And it wasn't just the Texans, it wasn't just Hood's Brigade. What was their major way that they would fight Confederates? More so than the Yankees. They would attack. They would charge. And horrendous losses. I'm working on the maps of the peninsula 7 days now. And the number of men that were slaughtered attacking batteries is truly amazing and disheartening. You don't see too many counterattacks, attacks by the Union troops against Confederate artillery. They just didn't do it. Okay, Ruff obliques us to the left. So they had been going straight. He will oblique them to the left, to directly toward their guns and their infantry support. So you've got Hampton's Legion, you've got the 18th Georgia. We'll talk about what happened to the 1st Texas in just a little bit. As we advanced toward that fence, these guns began to do their terrible work among us. With guns double-shotted with canister, they blew large gaps in their lines. It's hard to even imagine. We halted by sheer necessity by the fence along the pike and began to concentrate our fire on the gunners, who were now about 70 yards away. So they're going to stop, they're going to open fire, they're going to try to knock down as many of those gunners as they can to try to stop the killing, at least the killing of their own men. At one point, we had momentarily silenced the guns by shooting down every man who approached them, he said. We quickly formed and made at them at the double quick. In the intervening moments, more men had manned the guns. They're back in action. Imagine how frustrating that must be. Guns are out of action. You see them just sitting there, ready to be taken. They're charging toward them, and all of a sudden, new cannoneers. They could have been infantry or coming and manning those guns and opening fire again. When we approached within about 40 yards, the most horrible blast belched forth from the pieces, which killed and maimed dozens of our boys. So think about a turn of event very quickly. We fell back to the dubious shelter of the fence, where we continued our fire. Oh, I don't mean to fire again. Fire at the gunners. I found this on the web. I hadn't seen this before, but I think it captures what was happening fairly well. I don't know who the artist is, but you can see some Yankees on the other side. You can see some of the men have crossed over and are now retreating, and you can feel it's a desperate situation. Now, one of the things that's nice about Lemon's work is, and we just found out it is available, overpriced, but it is available. Lemon will leave maps of the action. And it's interesting because he's showing, here is the church right there. He's showing them coming out and then advancing. He's got the Hampton Legion here, the 18th Georgia here. He shows them pivoting to the left, Hampton Legion, and the 13th Georgia. You can see the guns right here, and also there's some cannon over here as well. Remember, there was some Battery B actually within the road itself, Hagerstown Pike, and you can see the Union Infantry, Patrick's Brigade, and some of the Iron Brigade. Twice more we attacked, each time coming closer than before, and each time taking horrendous casualties before being forced back for lack of support. So they're trying several times to take those guns. They're getting closer and closer, and the casualties are just growing horribly. Ruff will say, we discovered a fresh line of enemy approaching our left flank, threatening to cut us off, and our ranks being reduced by less than 1/3 of the original strength. We found it necessary to fall back. Now, one of the things that he's wrong about, and this is Lemon, is he's showing the 4th Texas right over, I guess this is the 4th Texas over here. I don't know where the 1st is. Oh, there's the 1st. Okay, the 4th Texas, he has them advancing toward the northern fence of the cornfield. Well, we know that's not the case, and I don't blame him, because with all the craziness, all the smoke, all the confusion, you know, he can see what's going on over here on his left, but he's not really seeing what's going on behind him and ultimately to his right. Benjamin Carter. Is that Robin? Robin, where is Carter's grave? Is it, now he commanded the 4th Texas. It's actually in a cemetery in Chambersburg. He died during the retreat from Gettysburg and will be buried, that's one on our bucket list. I forgot the name of the cemetery, but it's a very historic cemetery in Chambersburg, and you have him buried there, but he was very much alive at Antietam. He's commanding the 4th, and this is what he says, I discovered at once, remember, they're in reserve, they're behind, they're in this area right here, around where probably where that Massachusetts monument is, that the position was untenable. But, he says, if I fell back, the troops on my right who had entered the cornfield would be surrounded. Now remember, what's happening initially, it was 1, 2, they were actually they were the 4th. So, wheeling my regiment to the left, I posted the men along the fence. So he's lined up with the 18th Georgia, with Hampton Legion, along the fence on either side of the turnpike, and replied as best we could to the tremendous fire of the enemy. So he's not quite correct there. Oh, what happened? Let me go there. Some very nice quotes from members of the 4th Texas. The hottest place I ever saw on this earth or want to see hereafter. There were shot, shells, mini balls sweeping through the face of the earth, legs, arms, and other parts of human bodies flying up in the air like straw in a whirlwind. It's hard to even imagine. But when that canister hits bodies, hits fences, everything is going up in the air. The dogs of war were loose and havoc was their cry. And he will write also, I can't remember who this was, but they always take the Texans to the hottest part of the field, which is true. Okay, well, they cannot hold on. They've lost, in many cases, more than half their men. And they realize with these fresh troops across the pike, Iron Brigade, Patrick's Brigade, they're not going to be successful. That should be trot, by the way. We moved at a trot by the left flank down to the Dunker Church. So imagine that road. Remember the Hagerstown Pike and the fence, the split rail fence. Imagine they are retreating along the pike, being shot at all the way back. I had the queer notion that we were human participants in a shooting gallery. He had quite a sense of humor. Bullets kicked up dust and splintered fence rails as we ran. We were trying desperately to get away from Battery B, from the Union troops that are on the west side of Hagerstown Pike. Okay, so that's the first, and I should have said that there were 4 different actions. The first action we just covered, and that's what so many people think about. The 18th Georgia, Hampton's Legion, the 4th Texas, fighting along Hagerstown Pike, trying to capture Battery B unsuccessfully. But let's talk now about the 1st Texas. The 1st Texas is on the right flank of the 18th Georgia. They are supposed to be moving in unison with these other 2 regiments. Well, that doesn't happen. This is Philip Work, who is commander of the 1st Texas, and he writes, as soon as the regiment became engaged with the enemy in the cornfield, it became impossible to restrain the men. They rushed forward, pressing the enemy. So basically, they're not stopping. He couldn't stop them. They couldn't stay in line with the 18th Georgia. They're going all the way until we reached a considerable distance ahead of both the right and left wings of the brigade. And as you can see, they are out there all by themselves. Here they are. Oh, they're not up there yet. Okay. That wasn't supposed to be there. Okay. But they're heading toward the northern fence, the snake fence ahead of them. It was not until we reached the farthest side of the cornfield that I could check the regiment. By this time, we had broken the first line of battle of the enemy. It's probably the remnants of the Iron Brigade and other units that were in the, maybe Phelps that was already or still in the cornfield. And we had advanced to within 30 steps of the second line. That's where Robert Anderson is. There they are. They brought up 2 brigades. The remaining 2 brigades of Meade's division. They're going to be behind this fence, secreted behind a breastwork of fence, rails thrown in heaps upon the ground, when a battery of some 150 yards in our front was opened upon us. There they are. There's Anderson, Robert Anderson's brigade, and you can see you have a number of Union batteries that are firing into these men. It's a horrible situation to be all by yourself alone in that cornfield. They started with about 240 men, and they're probably up against 1,000 Union troops, Pennsylvania reserves. I dispatched, Work realized this is not going to have a happy ending. I dispatched to you, meaning Colonel Wilford, the commander of the brigade, that unless the regiments on my left were moved up quickly, are they going to move up quickly? They got their hands full. They're not moving anywhere. To my relief and support on the left, I would be forced to abandon my position and withdraw. And he didn't get reinforcements. So he takes about 240 or so, 226 men into the fight. Look at those casualties, 82%. It's hard to even imagine. They're oftentimes cited as being the highest casualty percentage of any regiment during the entire Civil War. But what did they mourn just as much as the men that they lost? The flag. That flag was the wedding dress of the first commander, Wigfall. And she's going to donate the dress to the 1st Texas. They will dye it appropriately, and they promise her, we will never lose this flag in battle to the dreaded enemy. They lost it. A number, I think 8 or 9 flag bearers. By the last time, the last one fell over, the men were so stunned that they didn't even realize the flag had gone down, and they left it behind. Okay, so now we've seen what happened on the left side. The 1st Texas is going to be almost annihilated. We're going to see heavy losses on the other regiments on the left. Let's now talk about Law's Brigade. Law's Brigade is coming into the right side of the cornfield. Some of the units, such as the 6th North Carolina, are actually going into and skirting the East Woods. They're going to be hit by canister by these Union artillery on the ridge line. And who is marching into position just as they're advancing? Majelton's regiments moving by the left flank. And they tell you this: when is the worst time for a unit to be attacked? When it's getting into position, before it's had the time to stabilize itself and get ready for the attack. They have not stabilized yet when they will be attacked by three regiments of Law's Brigade, and they will drive into the 4th and the 3rd Pennsylvania Reserves and drive them back beyond into the high ground beyond it, and then onto the other side. The 2nd Mississippi will be turning and fighting the 7th Pennsylvania Reserves, and it's ultimately going to force them to begin to withdraw, especially the left side. The 6th North Carolina will be battling the 8th Pennsylvania Reserves, that is right here on the edge of the cornfield and the East Woods. And you're starting to have these cannoneers getting very nervous and starting to be ordered to the rear. But they are sending canister, double canister, into these men. And then what happens? The 12th Corps is arriving. And this is from Law in his report in the official record. So far, we've been entirely successful. True. He's driving the Yankees away from the fence. And everything promised a decisive victory. I mean, look at this. Look at the hole. There's going to be a hole there in the Union line. A strong support was needed. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? To follow up on our success, but this they expected every moment. At this stage of the battle, a powerful federal force, 12th Corps, 10 times our number of fresh troops was thrown in our front. Our losses up to this time had been very heavy. The troops now confronting the enemy were insufficient to cover properly 1/4 of the line of battle. They'd lost so many men. Our ammunition was expended. The men had been fighting long and desperately and were exhausted from want of food and rest. And sometimes we forget these guys had not really eaten in those number of days, and they were weak. not to make excuses for them, but they will fall back. And then we have two other stray regiments that will come over. The 4th Alabama, that's part of Law's brigade. The 5th Texas, that's part of Wofford's brigade, will head over and fight in the area of the East Woods along with the 21st Georgia Walker's brigade. And when everyone else is retreating, they'll be left in place. In fact, as you can see, James Nesbitt, who has a very nice book, 4 Years on the Firing Line, we lay behind the fence for an hour watching the battle rage. Our men firing sometimes, that should be a 2, the right, that's why I should let Linda look at this, 2 the right and the left, but the distance was too great. But imagine you're just laying there, there's nobody in your front, and you see action, you see Yankees all around. You're going to try to fire at them, but it really wasn't effective. And eventually, when the 12th Corps enters the fight, they're going to be overwhelmed, and they're going to be forced to withdraw as well. Oops. Did I miss that? Okay. So, let's review. The losses, 11th Miss, the 2nd, and the 104th and the 6th. As you can expect, the ones right up against the north face of the cornfield are going to have the greatest losses. And you might say, well, wait a minute. The 18th Georgia only lost about 85 men. They only brought into action about 170. So they lost over half their men. So you have to also, we don't have the numbers that they started with all these units. But the entire division will lose about half of their men in the fighting in the cornfield. So how do you feel of your hood? Not good. Because he's expecting reinforcements. He's been told reinforcements are coming from DHL's division. And who is eventually going to come up and supposedly support him? Roswell Ripley. But Roswell Ripley is going to move up very slowly. First, his men have to burn down the Mumacorum, right? The 3rd North Carolina. And they'll move up very slowly, too slowly. By the time they get to the actual cornfield, Hood's men have already retreated. Colonel Ruff, General Rofer, actually should be Colonel Rofer, and I am told General Hood were livid in their wrath that they are not being supported. We had done all that was humanly possible and more, but as long as we were and against mass regiments and batteries of guns, no more could possibly have been achieved. So.